much for tuning in. So in this episode I'm going to be covering the filtration system that I'm setting up for the new saltwater tank. Remember, this tank is going to be housing at least one Moray eel, and since this is a very big fish which produces a lot of biological waste, the filtration system is tailored specifically towards that. So let me show you what I'm going to be setting up. Okay, so this sump is a Triton 44 sump, and this is the older version 1. So here we have the water come down into the sump. This is a very big refugium section. Here we have a protein skimmer that is a DC skimmer, so it's controllable. And then here we have the return. So for the return, I'm going to be using two smaller pumps instead of one big pump. And that is because if one of them ever fails, I still have another one, that can at least do 50% of the job until I have time to replace the one that failed. And the way this tank is built is we have a return up there in the back. It's pretty hard to see, but basically above my finger. And then we have another return on the other side over there. So the returns are 1 inch. So what I'm going to be doing is here the bulkheads. I will have a 90-degree elbow, and these are one-way check valves, which are very important to use in case of a power outage and water wants to come down. This will stop any flooding. And it's important to mount these as high up as possible so that the least amount of water is going to try to make its way down and put pressure on the valve. So the valves here, these are actually 1.5 inch valves because I couldn't find 1 inch valves, but I simply glued on a 1.5 inch to 1 inch reducer. So I'm going to have a piece of 1 inch pipe to connect these, and I do this on both ends. And then here we have a 1 inch hose barb connector, and that is for the braided vinyl tubing, which is very strong. And yeah, this will then make its way down to the sump and into the two pumps that sit there. And then for the water that's coming down from the sump, from the aquarium into the sump, behind this overflow box, there's a 1.5 inch connector or bulkhead opening. So we have a 1.5 inch bulkhead, a 90-degree elbow, and then we have a 1.5 inch pipe going down, down, down. And then here we have a union, and then an elbow that will point towards the left, where the water goes into the sump. The reason why I have this union here is because it allows me to move this pipe and adjust it a little bit. And so it gives me that flexibility. So the pipe will go up to here. And then because the Triton sump has 3 1 inch connectors that sit there instead of 1.5 inch, I decided to basically build a 3-way manifold, and then the 1.5 inch pipe will then have to be reduced to a 1 inch right here. But I will do this as close to the end as possible to get the most flow from the 1.5 inch opening. And then because I have 3 1 inch connections there waiting for the water, it won't, reduce the flow as much as I, originally were afraid of. So yeah, then that's basically it. I may actually put a ball valve here before it reaches the 3 connectors. And this will allow me, to shut off any flow completely for any reason. Very useful to have that option. But yeah, that's pretty much the plumbing. I'm not going to film, how I glue this because it's really simple, and you just use PVC glue and actually PVC primer and then PVC cement. And first you put on the primer, which is the pink stuff, and then you put in the other material, which is in blue, and that will basically create a really strong bond. And that's pretty much it. So I will come back when it's all put together, and then we will go over the results. Turn flow, we are going to be using 2 of these Aquatics water flow accelerators, and make sure they have a 1 inch connector. and we have another one right here, and basically it's really simple to install. You need to make sure that these bulkheads are the type of threaded to slip, because we're going to be using PVC piping to slip it on the other end in. And for the front, we want to be able to use these threaded accelerators, which then basically just screw in really easy, and then you can direct the flow however you want. So I'm going to be pointing it down, and since we're going to have another one over there, the water will flow to the center and into the overflow box and then down into the sump. So I wanted to film a quick update on tooling, what tools are best for this job. So when it comes to PVC pipes, the best tool to use is an actual PVC pipe cutter. So if you have watched the the plumbing video for the discus mega tank, you know that I used a saw, and that just takes so much time, so much effort, and it creates a mess with the dust of the PVC. So this gives you like a really straight cut, no mess, and you can go to work right away and get the project done a lot faster. Another tool when it comes to flexible PVC tubing is to use a heat gun, because the heat gun will allow you to really slip this into barb fittings and much more easier. So definitely use a heat gun instead of hot water. It will take much longer. And then the third tip that I just found out is obviously you want to use a bulkhead wrench for these bulkheads to secure them tight. But when it comes to the 2-inch version, it doesn't really fit. So even though it's supposed to be marked to 2 inches, but it doesn't really work. So a workaround that I found, if you're also a do-it-yourself guy when it comes to working on cars, is to use an oil filter wrench. So that oil filter wrench really saved me a trip to the hardware store, and I was able to get this off with that and the old one and put in the new one with it too. So oil filter wrench for the rescue. Alright guys, so the filtration is finally set up, the plumbing and everything. So as you can see here, I have 4 blocks of marine, Brightwell Aquatics bioplate. So they fit nicely in this Triton sump, Triton 44. This is the older version, the V1. These, fitted in perfectly. The ones on the back I had to saw off a little bit, and the sawed off pieces I put them in here as well. We have some keto algae, and here we have an aqua illumination prime. The reef version. This is not the refugium version. I had this laying around, and all I really did was to make sure that the individual light settings that you can customize, that they are set to mostly use the reds and none of the blue, green, and whatever. So mostly reds and a little bit of white, and this is perfect for growing keto algae. I had some copepods in my clownfish tank. This is called a copepod hotel. So they are basically hiding in there during the day, and then at night they can be in here, and they can feed off the the keto or whatever else is in the water. For the keto, I make sure that I'm dosing this into the water to help it grow, especially in the beginning when this is a brand new setup. And yeah, we see the manifold that I built. We have a union here, a union there, so I can partially disassemble it if I have to do some replacing of parts. We have a ball valve, very important. And then yeah, we have no filter socks, so basically water just flows in here. Big refugium section here, which this will grow a lot bigger. Then we have this skimmer. This is from the company IOAOI. Fits perfectly in here, the largest one they have. Comes with a controller because this is a DC pump in there. The DC pump controller is actually for a wave maker, so they just use this in combination with this skimmer. They didn't actually create their own, so some of the functions here like wave, you don't touch those, you only basically turn it on and off and change the speed. But yeah, this is in this chamber, and then here I haven't set up this yet. This usually houses some I guess sponges, and then we have two return pumps for redundancy, and I went with the Jibao pumps, the DCP 5000. Each of them holds about half of this tank's water, you know, returning it over 10 times. So basically I have two, and then yeah, this is, I guess, sufficient enough. The great thing is these have controllers, you know, they're DC pumps, so I can fine tune everything, especially when it comes to the flow and into the, you know, the skimmer section, that I don't constantly have changes in water and the water height, which would affect the skimmer performance. But yeah, I think everything works out pretty well, no leaks anywhere, and it's a little bit of an experiment because the eels, they produce so much waste. They're really large fish, and I'm not sure if one skimmer and this refugium will be able to manage. If it doesn't, then I have a second skimmer, which is one that I originally bought, but it was too big to fit in this section. But I decided to keep it just in case I need it. And I could also always put this second skimmer in here if that's absolutely necessary. But if not, I like to have a refugium section here because it's kind of like a little separate aquarium in a way. I can put my clownfish in here. If I have any issues with them fighting or whatever, you know, I can make this like a little nice, you know, little setup as well. So just make sure that it has a lot of algae and that its main purpose, which is, you know, nutrient export, is, you know, still the main goal of this section. But yeah, other than that, it's not too loud. It's pretty quiet actually for, you know, how big the system is. And yeah, I can't think of anything else to say. You know, I used flexible PVC tubing to have a little bit of flexibility here when it comes to, you know, moving the or putting the pumps, moving them slightly. And for the light, I have basically a basic light that only uses either the white or the blue lights, so nothing to grow corals or whatever. Right now it's on the white setting. I'm going to switch it to blue. So if I do have, you know, a big problem with algae, I can always set it to blue, and I will still be able to see the eels. But my plan is to, you know, try to set it to the white light and see how that goes. And then for the cover, I decided to use polycarbonate panels, which is usually used for greenhouses. And the benefit of that is that unlike these PV, actually acrylic panels, these don't bend at all. So I have about, you know, actually just under an inch of clearance here, and this is about 0.8 inches thick. So it fits perfectly under it. I do have a second panel, so they come in twos, 24 deep and 48 long. But I decided to actually keep this small one. I just have to cut it, you know, in size so that it's flush with the tank. Because this one I can easily pull out when it comes to feeding. I don't have to remove, you know, the whole thing. And if I was to use a piece of the other sheet that came with this, and it was all the same, the light would always, you know, move a little bit when I pull this, and I don't want to deal with this. I want this to be set in place. I want to put heavy bricks on here to make sure the eels, you know, don't ever come out. And this is a lighter piece, but I'll just make sure I have one brick here and one over the other end. And then I only have these two bricks, you know, to deal with when I have to feed them once or twice a week. And yeah, that is pretty much it. In the next video, we should be talking about picking the eels up, because there's really nothing else that I have going on this. Have a titanium heater, you know, 800 watts in the refugium section. This is the Inkbird controller. I'm trying to keep this aquarium at 75, but it's always a little bit warmer in here because of, you know, electronics and stuff. But the eels can handle, you know, 72 all the way to 82, I believe. So that should be fine. One thing I'm going to be interested in is if, you know, this salt water will have any, you know, effect on my electronics. So usually those two don't go too well, but I just have to make sure I keep everything nice and wiped down and clean, and may get a cover to try to partially cover this up. The refugium section comes with a nice lid, you know, laser cut and everything. But yeah, I'm still thinking about trying to cover this up in some sort of way if possible. And yeah, this is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you get some ideas on how to plumb this tank or whatever, and how filtration could work for an eel tank. And yeah, so the next video, like I said earlier, is likely going to be me picking up the eels and putting them into the tank, and I will make sure I will have you, you know, come along on that part. Okay? All right. Thank you guys, and see you next time.